Hi, this is Randy Kirk, and I am so excited to have Brian here for the second part of the interview that we started the other day. If you haven't seen the first part of that interview, you need to go back and check it out. I think you're going to be pretty amazed at the stuff that we talked about. Now, I'm going to do a very quick recap. I told Brian not to get bored while I do this kind of long introduction. But Brian is a futurist. Brian is an actual scientist. Brian also has a blog, nextbigfuture.com, that you're going to want to go look at if you like futurism, if you want to learn about the details of a lot of stuff that's going on in the various parts of science in the world. You really want to check that blog out. And also, Next Big Future he's also got a YouTube channel. You're going to want to subscribe there too, because Brian, okay, let's be honest, there's a lot of YouTubers out there that are not scientists, including me. I mean, I am a scientist. I have a degree in psychology. That's a science, right? Brian?
Mm-hmm. Right.
We agree or no? Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
I'll call it a scientist.
But there's also a lot of YouTubers out there that are not that have never owned a business, that don't know anything about marketing. They have no idea how to run a manufacturing business, especially. So in our book, The Elon Musk Mission, we have scientists, two of them. One of them even has a PhD in AI, and we have me, who's run plastics manufacturing company for 28 years. So we have some folks that actually know what they're talking about. Brian is one of those people. And on the first half, we talked about the singularity. And Brian, I'm gonna take my best shot at telling people what you think the singularity is, to see if I got it right. So. Yeah. To me, what you said was that the singularity is when AI gets to the point where it is multiple times faster, more clever, can do computation, is smarter, maybe, if you want to call it smarter, than humans. And therefore, at that point, all of the world's problems could be solved basically by AI. Would that be close?
Yeah, that's a summary that I'll go with that. Sure.
Okay.
I can also say that another way to do it, which is that one definition I prefer more, is that you don't need the AI part. And basically we hit a point where various technologies create a exponential increase in capabilities, which is not necessarily intelligence dependent. It could be based on other technologies. So there's other ways to get there. But in either case, there's a technology explosion, which creates a surge in capabilities and wealth, et cetera.
And then if I want to get you quoted correctly here, you also believe that we're basically at the point of that happening now.
Right.
Okay. So we're on the verge of this technology explosion. And the other thing another reason you need to go back and look at this previous video that we did together is he explains there why Kathy Wood changed his life. And Kathy Wood usually changes my life every first Friday of every month when she does her 40-minute review of the financial situation in the country, because I think it's brilliant. So, okay, so that's kind of where we stopped off last time. I made you Techno King for a day and said, what would you do given Elon's cornucopia of opportunity that's in front of him? You and I are in 100% agreement that there are three parts of Tesla right now that any one of those three is a $1 trillion opportunity. All three of them are ready to ramp, and that would and are ramping now. That would be the semi-trucks, the energy storage, and the cars. All the other divisions, all the other stuff that we talk about, they're all doing fine, and they're going to ramp, and they're going to do well, and robots are coming. That's a whole nother story. But those three alone probably individually could become the largest companies in the world, probably will become the largest companies in the world. And then if you put the three together, it's multiple times larger. And my concern has been, and you and I've talked about this several times, how do you do all three with limited resources in terms of materials, limited resources in terms of battery manufacturing, limited resources in terms of brain power, limited resources in terms of people. And then in making you Techno King for the day, I said, okay, what order would you do these things in? Which would you give the emphasis to? And I'm not going to let you repeat it here. I want them to go back and find out by looking at the previous video.
But the other thing would be that I want to say that if I'm king for a day, one of the issues is, dealing with the current year's situation, because if they're targeting getting to 50,000 semi trucks in 2024 next year, right? And they're ramping this year to get there. So, but then you want to push beyond that with because the number of semi trucks and large trucks in the world is about 280,000 per year in the United States, about 4 million total. And then in Europe, there's about 350,000 per year and about 6 million total. But over in Asia, there's about 20 million trucks total. And the China gets about almost 2 million in a good year, right? And then Japan is number 2 with about a little over 500,000. So Japan gets more large trucks than almost Europe and the United States combined. And then India is number 3 with a size of large truck area that's comparable to US and to Europe individually. So they have to make the factories, because it even takes a year or 2 years to scale up. You want to make the factories over there. But it's initial scale, and then as soon as possible, for the end of this year, beginning next year, announce those new semi-truck factories, as well as Cybertruck, because Cybertruck is not just competing against F-150. There's F-250, F-350, F-450, F-550, F-650, right? So there's all these other trucks in between so it blurs between truck and semi, right? So they need to scale up and ramp that up as soon as possible. In terms of the limitation on batteries, I believe that we're heading into a period where there could be a glut of batteries in 2024 and 2025. So everyone's talking about how bad the car economy is going to be, right? How we're going to have a recession, demand softness in China, all those things, right? But the Chinese battery companies, CATL, BYD, S-Volt, CATL, all these companies have already put about $200 billion into making battery factories. It's why we went from 300 gigawatts in 2021 to 600 gigawatts in 2022, and we're heading to about 2 terawatts, 2,000 gigawatts in 2025 from the Chinese manufacturers. And then Europe and the United States heading toward a terawatt in 2025. So it'd be 3 terawatt hours of batteries, potentially. You can slow this up some. You say, okay, the production of EVs have gone soft. We can slow down the turning on the factories or going at lower production, but you've already put in your capital, right? So I put in X billion dollars into a factory. If I don't use it, it's hurting me bad. And I need to scale it up because the thing is, I need to get the market share there. We've seen this before with solar power.
Right.
China chose to dominate making the solar panels. Almost all the solar panels are in China. And they also upgraded their solar panel factories, switch out generation in order to make them cheaper and better. There were years where there's glut of solar panels, right? China said, right now. And so they said, screw it, we're going to keep going anyway, right? So because we're going to take market share from the US and from Europe and something like that, we'll crush the other guys, we'll eat losses. And the China state governments and national government will say, don't worry, we got your back. Here's the billions of dollars to keep this all going, right? So same thing on their battery side, right? Where they're gonna say, we have 80% of the market, we're gonna keep 80, 70% of the market, even if the US starts increasing, with the Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll move some factories over there, but we want to keep the majority of this here. We want to keep majority of solar and keep majority of the batteries. And if we have to eat losses in the tens of billions of dollars, whatever. So they don't care, right? So then there'll be this glut of batteries. So if they have enough batteries for over 50 million cars by 2025, EVs, right? So that'd be like over half of the world's production, right?
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, so then there won't be enough cars. You can't just keep shoving them into small cars, 50 kilowatt hour a pack, right? Every 10 million cars would be 10 million times 50, kilowatts. Maybe you have half a gigawatt. It'd be like
half a terawatt.
Half terawatt, right? So there's, and a lot of those cars would be small battery packs. Anyway, so then there'd be a bunch of battery packs, maybe an extra terawatt hour more that you need to shove into something else. And something else would be semi-trucks and
energy
battery storage, right?
Cool.
Yeah. So I think there's the abundance of batteries. The worse the ramping up period is now, the more batteries there will be for other products, for Tesla and for anyone else. And Tesla is already ramping to that. So getting that to massive scale is an execution issue,
right? Where
can they get, later going to 200 gigawatts? Can they make more things? And can they rapidly snap them up?
It seems like energy would be the easiest thing to ramp because putting batteries into a container seems like an easy thing to do. And it doesn't seem like, in some ways, it seems like maybe the trucks wouldn't be that hard to ramp either. I don't think those trucks are as complex as the cars.
Right. I think they're both easier, but it's the kind of thing where I view them as being connected. As I've mentioned before,
yes, that
each semi-truck, every six, you need to have a megapack. You need to go grid, megapack, truck.
Right.
Because if I just suck 2 megawatt hours, I can't do it because the grid doesn't have that power off a substation. Right. If I do try and take it's like everything from that substation, which just doesn't make sense. It's like, all suburb over here, go dark for a while.
Yes, right. While I load my truck up.
Right. It doesn't work.
So I get it. That was where we ended.
Yeah.
Go back and look at the other video if you want to see how we got there. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, because again, folks, Brian was one of the authors on the Elon Musk mission. We are now working on the Elon Musk magic. I should say, quite frankly, Brian is working on the Elon Musk magic. I've written a little bit of outline. I've written a little bit of content here and there, but I really haven't dug into it yet. But the Elon Musk magic is going to be talking about the age of abundance. And the age of abundance is how we started this interview just now, talking about this concept of the singularity, or instead of the singularity, the fact that the capability, the technological capability is really already there, are just about to burst loose to really bring us into an age of abundance. But I want to back that up just a little bit. In addition to loving Elon Musk and Tony Seba and Kathy Wood, in terms of the people that are really focused on this future and really focused on the reality of all the things that you've been talking about, there's two other names. So Steven Pinker and Bjorn Lomborg. Both are writing about the fact that in many ways we're already there. The world has really outrun the poverty issue. I mean, when I say poverty, has outrun the food issue. Basically, there's nobody in the world that's not getting fed unless it's because of war or because of some stupid dictator someplace. We've already gone from 5% literacy 150 years ago to 95% literacy today. Most people are now getting schooling, even except for some of the certain kinds of countries that are affected by religion. The women are almost all getting educated today. So and there's a whole list like that of how incredible it is today, what technology has done to provide us with abundance already. So you're taking us in your thesis here from an already, and first question is, do you agree that those guys are right?
Well, they've all said many things.
That's true.
And so I agree with some and many parts of it. I think broadly aligned on many things. I met Kathy Wood, as I mentioned. I've also had coffee and met with Tony Seba several years ago. So I covered his work 8 years ago, and I met him personally like about 4 years ago. So I was talking about, becoming a researcher with him and his consultancy and that kind of thing.
Oh.
So I'm, very familiar with all of his ideas in terms of energy transportation, as well as on food and agriculture and other things.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I'm not quite as assured by his statement that monetary drivers, ensure X happens. That we'll get this change and X happens. There's the issues with execution that we've been discussing,
right.
And financial modeling, between the points, right?
Right.
And you can look at the broad scope of things, and yes, these things trend out or that kind of stuff. But as we've seen, it can be a bumpy ride. Right?
Yes.
Stock can be a bumpy ride. Other things can be a bumpy ride. Wars, other things happen, and things can get disrupted. Also, I do not underestimate incompetence and corruption. So that's, I've written some article about that where I discuss the if you have enough incompetence, you can overwhelm. Basically, what happened with Africa or Latin America, where basically, like, why did they become 10 times, 20 times poorer? Why did that do something? One, they didn't have some educational base, and then two, there was a broad level of incompetence. Like,
right.
Certainly when China started, overcame being competent at Mao, right? Then they, had Deng Xiaoping say, okay, now we're going to catch up, right? So they were held down, though, even though they had plenty of smart people, my parents, my grandparents, or whatever, right? They held down that capability, through the dictatorship, through also math and competence, by saying also, with the beginning of the revolution, let's take the competent doctors and everyone else and get rid of them. So you can screw things up so completely,
And the opposite is true too. I happen to have about 3 or 4 years ago, my wife and I went to Singapore, Seoul, and Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're going through those 3 locations, we were thinking to ourselves the whole trip. We're going, in 1950, these 3 cities were basically parking lots. They were basically empty lots. They were basically bombed to oblivion, or absolutely nothing there after war. Singapore had been in war for, I guess, centuries, and basically there was nothing there. And in just 50 to 70 years, they are now the cleanest, safest, and highest tech cities in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you could say, well, Bolivia could be next. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible. It's a matter of competence, I guess, would be your thought.
Right. In certain basic education things, like, having the high rate of literacy, having some educational base to take off of, and then being open to business opportunities where you say, okay, external forces can come in, external companies come in, bring technology, bring stuff, right. And then you can generate. So there's, again, a complex topic, but that's aligned to that. So, there's certain details of it, but then you say, okay, assuming non-massive screw up, assuming some level of competence, and say looking at the trend of how much competence is currently occurring in a particular area, then we can say, here's where the trend goes, here's what can be done, et cetera. So you need to look at the situation on the ground in a particular area and say, okay, where can we make the improvements? So, one of the things that I like about Bjorn Lomborg is that he divided all of the issues in the world. He said, okay, here's the top 100 issues. Mm-hmm. And I haven't read his books. Actually, I've just listened to multiple interviews with him. He said, here's all the really serious issues in the world: disease or water issues, sewage issues, whatever. Took all the major issues in the world, in particular in the third world, our poorest areas of the world. And he says, okay, these are the important issues. Which one should we address first, second, and third? Which one do we have the greatest chance of overcoming, et cetera? Kind of put a economic analysis to it and said, why don't we attack these in a intelligent way
one at a time or 5 at a time or 10 at a time, but based on where we have the greatest opportunity to get a return, and then go to the next one as we accomplish these. Is your theory, I'm being honest here about our new book, do you attack it a little bit the same way? Do you say, okay,
No.
Oh, not at all. Okay.
No. So that I don't agree with, because you're somehow assuming that the world's capacity to simultaneously solve problems is something they need to sequence or limit or something like that. There's 8 billion people in the world. You can have China rising, India can rise at the same time. All these things can happen at the same time because you got 8 billion people. It's not like, okay, you billion people get behind those billion people and we'll solve this problem for you. And then, no, there's no kind of sequencing or single things. And humanitarian wise, you say, okay, we can make this huge difference with a cheap amount of money. We can make birthing kits to prevent 5 million birth deaths every year, cheap, like a couple of bucks, or we can do certain things with smokeless cookers and that kind of stuff to prevent the death. All that is great and should happen and does not have to wait for anything else.
I see.
Okay? We can solve those things cheap, fast, should be done, right? Plenty of other problems, relatively cheap, fast, totally doable, should all be done, right? But in terms of changing the world, going to abundance, right? It's the tip of the spear. It's the most developed, the biggest high leverage point ideas that will make that happen, right? It's like, roll the clock back 23 years, we got the extra growth from, widespread adoption of a graphical internet and from smartphone, right? That added the next layer on above PCs, et cetera, right? So that a whole IT revolution, multiple stages of it, and networking revolution occurred on top of the industrialized base of mainly United States, North America, and Europe, the developed world, right? The developed world going to a next level was what mattered. So for me, the abundance is from, okay, Tesla and Elon are executing at these particular things. They have these particular technological capabilities at some scale, and we can get to this next level. Yes, there's execution involved. Yes, there's some scaling of the thing. But if that tip of the spear advances, and it doesn't have to involve government, which is a good thing, although the government
better than it doesn't, yeah.
but but then being a partner with the Inflation Reduction Act or other companies getting subsidies, they can help grease that thing. But it's those incremental abilities. I view these as how technology stack, right? You have base technologies related to the physical world, and you have information technologies, and then you have other capabilities beyond that and those kind of things. So rebuilding the base layer of energy and transportation and making that vastly more efficient is something that is fundamental to that, and changing the supply chain using the semi-trucks, cyber trucks, self-driving, and energy and solar, right?
Right.
Altering that layer and making it 10 times more efficient. That is what happened in the Industrial Revolution, right? So that was when we went from horses and bicycles and ships, sailing ships or barges and stuff like that, to over the course of from 1840s when the rail took off. Right. 1910s was when the cars took off, right? Even though various things were developed earlier, when they became at scale, those things enabled us to go from everyone being in the developed world at about like $1,000, $2,000 per person, up to $30,000 per person, and being able to increase the population by 5-10x to achieve this 100x increase in overall world economy. So similarly, you could have, and hopefully do it faster than 100 years, you could have this going 100 times up from here, right? And it's a certain number of doublings, it'd be about like 8 doublings to get there. So currently we're doubling it once every 25 years since World War II. So we've gone up like 16 times in terms of steel, oil, et cetera. And so we can going up by 8 times in 100 years would be doubling every 12 years. It would be doubling the growth rate to like 6% or something like that. And I think we can do it even faster and more than that, right?
Wow.
So that would be the abundance. We're basically everyone's growing at nearly the rate of China during its economic miracle, right?
Okay.
And I think we can even grow faster than that. So that is, yeah.
So now, of course, the abundance that you're talking about is primarily financial abundance, that everybody gets to eat really well. Everybody has plenty of recreation time. Everybody can afford education. Everybody has a great place to live. So then I take two looks at this, and I look back. So my wife and I have been watching all the best-selling, the top Oscar-winning movies starting in 1927, the very first time there was an Oscar. So or 29, I forget. Anyway, we were watching all of those years. And I look at those folks, and they're sitting in a house that looks pretty much like mine, and they're driving a car, and they're, everybody kind of, living pretty well in 1929, 1940, 1950. They're doing pretty well. I was alive in the 50s. I remember it as being satisfying. So it seems like we'll have these things which will give us a comfort level. At least first world nations and second world nations will now be very comfortable in terms of maybe not worrying about tomorrow in terms of our income, or in terms of our ability to keep a lifestyle going. And we might be able to make more trips, and the trips will be faster to get there and more comfortable and whatnot. But on an overall level, and you'll bring the third world people along. So now all the third world people will be first world people at some point. Mm-hmm. And then what the layers look like on top of that, I'm not 100% sure, because I look at the very rich. And it's just a matter, again, of how fast they can get to the tourist spot. I used to say that the only difference between me and a guy that's worth 100 million is the size of his television. But now I have a 75-inch television on my wall. So I'm not sure there's any difference between me and that guy at all at this point. So I'm not sure what the layers are on top of that, number one. So do you have theories about what the layers look like on top of that?
Yes, I do. So one, in terms of the lack of difference where certain basic things look similar, right? Between us and World War II, 1950s level people. As I said, fine, the cars look kind of similar, the technology changed inside a little bit, they looked similar, right? But the volume of them was different. When you were fighting World War II, Germany going for the oil in the Caucasus, one, there was 15% of the oil in the world at the time, 80% of it was the United States because of Rockefeller and Ford creating the mass production, energy, and transportation stuff, right? So that with the economic strength that made it impossible for Germany or Japan to win, right? Because they had more production. But that oil that he was going for is the equivalent of 4 or 5 days, 10 days of oil for us today, right? Because we had 100 million barrels versus, 8 million barrels per day, back then, right? So the scale of things went up. Also, the population went up by about 4 times, right? So there are these differences that are, when you compare just a house, admittedly a smaller house, to a bigger house, there was, and then, one car for, 10 people to, one car for 2 people or something like that. So there's differences in terms of what is available, right? Like, everyone in my 5-person family using one car, right? Versus, now I'm growing up and each of the people have a car each, kind of thing, right? So there are differences in quantity, and quantity does matter, right? But in terms of the real difference, go through the small point, but the big difference would be that in terms of now and say 20 years from now, this skipping, because if you only look at 5-10% differences, it's doesn't matter. But when you go from three doublings 8 times, that's the difference between Mexico, at $8,000, or a poor nation, or rural China to, developed world, right? Then you can see, wow, put them side by side, 8 times difference, right?
Right.
So that is something where you can see the difference. So you need to like jump forward. If we're doubling every 8 years or something like that, right? We go through a surge of growth, and say in 24 years, we've had 8 doublings. Now we're 10 times richer. Okay, now you can see, okay, this looks different from that, right?
Yeah.
Then the per capita income goes from 70, 80,000 to, a $500,000, right? So now you say, oh, well, that is crazy different, right? They got the car, they got their private plane, they got robotic stuff, all that kind of things. But just the money difference, that's one thing. But then if you get the full self-driving, if you get Tesla bot, right? Then you get Tesla bot being the humanoid robot that does things, and you build that to scale, where basically making a Tesla bot is 1/30th the material of a Model Y. So Elon talked about getting 20 million cars, most will be Model Y and other, maybe Model 2 or whatever it is, those 20 million cars. And no one says, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then 100 million cars, like the other companies make up the other 80%. Right. Although I don't think the ratio will be that. I think Tesla will get more, but whatever. No one blinks an eye at 20 million. Well, they do blink an eye at 2030. They maybe see 2035, right? But then that would also mean you can build that many, you could build 600 million Tesla bots. Oh yeah. Right. So a Tesla bot at, say $10,000, that, amortized working, it doesn't sleep, right? So instead of working 2,000 hours a year, it can work 8,500, right? So, and I can, if I can afford one car, I can afford 30 bots.
Right.
So now if I have 30 bots and they're all doing work for me, or I own them and they're working in a factory for me, right? Then it's like owning the vending machines. There's people who like are retired owning vending machines, selling stuff because they're generating revenue, right? So if everything is no longer a depreciating asset, it's a money generating asset, right? That at the $5,000, $10,000 level, and it's making $500, $1,000 a month, right? If I own 30 of them, then it's $30,000 a month, right? So that is the difference where we transition from, I'm the worker, I'm the whatever, to I own assets, which are Tesla bots and robotic taxis and other things, and they're generating this productivity. And I'm like, you're living like Downton Abbey, or, something where you're in the mansion with 30 servants.
Now, now I watched Downton Abbey, and I've watched all the British royalty shows and all that stuff. And those people are bored out of their skulls. Those people are just sitting around sipping tea in the middle of the afternoon instead of doing anything productive. So psychologically, right now, I look at this generation in America, the most spoiled generation in history by a lot. And they're coming up and they're pretty weird. They're pretty whack. And if the Americans are whack, the Japanese are leading the way. Those kids are really off the end of there's studies being done that they don't even have sex anymore, and they have no interest in ever having sex. These people are, so of course I'm the guy that has the degree in psychology, but I'm just curious what you think. What happens psychologically and sociologically to the world if I've got a robot coming in and giving me foot massages and who knows what else, and I've got all the luxuries that I can possibly cram into my house, and I can go in seconds through my goggles to do a tour of Rome, or I can get on a rocket and be there in 45 minutes, and there's millions of people all trying to get to the Eiffel Tower at the same time. Anyway, help me out. What's going to happen?
So we skip forward, 20, 30 years, this 10x, 20x abundance has happened, right? And you have all these robots, and the transition period is where you're, just like the guy who owns all the vending machines, 100 vending machines, and doesn't have to do that particular work. He's still managing it. So he's managing assets, doing things. So everyone has a certain amount of asset management that they're doing, which is kind of work, right? And they're assigning and identifying opportunities, and so investing in things and doing stuff. So everyone becomes a business owner, right? And so they're doing that level of work, and they can choose to work hard, they can choose not to, because the difference between tens of $1 million, $100 million, not as much. I've known someone who had over $20 million, and he said, once you're above that, you're just keeping score, right? So it's also viewed as we achieve a financial escape velocity. So right now we're trying to get to orbit, financial orbit, but our expenses pull us back down, and we can crash into the ground and not get there. When you're generating income is such that it offsets all your expenses, then you've reached orbit, or you're going beyond orbit, where basically nothing can pull you down other than intentionally crashing the ship, right? Gravity, the expenses can't drag you down, right? So then what happens? People have the choice, people can be retired, like we're heading to a world where 30% of people are over 65, they're retired. Is that, oh no, horrible, they're retired, they're not doing stuff.
Maybe. I'm looking at some of these people in my neighborhood. It may be horrible. I'm not sure.
Right. But then the other thing would be that I think that with the fully reusable rocket, the Starship, and making thousands of them, so their prices won't be more than the Boeing 787. The Boeing 787 cost $3 million. The all metal Starship and Super Heavy, I worked out the cost. You can get that down to the $10 million level. So it'd be 30 times cheaper, 30 times faster, right? And it can take more mass to orbit and beyond, right? So, and then once you take the Tesla bots to other worlds, you can mine and do whatever there. So I view one of the things that a lot of people could do, and to have the participation, is to go adventuring into the solar system, right? If you have that full capability where you have rocket ships to replace cargo and replace passenger travel, and they're doing the stuff of sending stuff to Mars, like 1 million people, like that, there's no reason to stop at 1 million people, the city of Mars. That's Elon's goal, right? But if it all works and you have Tesla bots that can do the manufacturing, I can bring a self-replicating gigafactory to Mars. If it takes me a year to make another gigafactory, because I got like 10,000 Tesla bots working in the factory, and they're also doing the mining of materials on Mars, right? Then in 10 years, I have 1,000 gigafactories. In 20 years, I have 1 million gigafactories. And in 30 years, I have 1 billion. Even if you say, okay, it takes 2 years, fine. 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, I got all this stuff, and I filled up the solar system, right? So filling up the solar system is going this billion times more, right? So that goes to the fact that we have too few people, because, if I'm leading an army of 1 million Tesla bots and going whatever, and managing everyone, if I say 1 billion gigafactories, then it's like 10 people for every, or 8 people for every gigafactory, right? Like too few managers. So you can go out into all the asteroid belt where there's all these things, whole planetoids, right? So it's like, the robots can't have all the fun, conquering and converting asteroids, right? Going out to the Oort comet cloud, with the galaxy, there wouldn't be enough solar systems. We wouldn't be able to go to every solar system. There'd be like, 500 million.
So the purpose of life would be adventure.
Yeah, that would be one of the broad purposes. Yeah.
So
boldly going.
Which purpose? So you get to choose your adventure.
That's right.
Okay. So Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Come on, we need to go on an adventure.
That's right.
No, I'm really comfortable just sitting here. Oh, no. Come on, let's go on an adventure.
So in some ways, Star Trek had it right in terms of like boldly going and money not being a thing, because all the basic needs, I mean, just like, back, 700 years ago, it's like, okay, man, I must get my food, I must have whatever, everybody's scrapping to survive. Sure. We don't, mostly beyond that kind of thing. It's, kind of a concern, right? But really, the vast majority of people, yes, I can afford my McDonald's, is more concerned that I'm not eating right as opposed to whether I can eat, right? And it's not like, oh, we've gone soft because we can't, I'm not killing the tiger or the bear. It's like, I don't need that. So you've changed to a world where you're doing something else, change from farming to the other things. So I don't view the change as being that horrible. That being said, I feel that people will want to retain more of the old lifestyle of things, until you have other generations come along. It's like people won't say, oh yeah, I want to do crazy different stuff. I want to go to Mars. Maybe it'll be a next generation that does that in a bigger way. But, people can choose to have that lifestyle. And unlike the past, we can have more choice. Like having a richer, abundant world means I got lots of choices. I don't have to do.
Now, Costco has proven that choice drives us nuts.
Mm-hmm.
If we have too much choice, we're like, oh, we don't know what to do. We get all confused, and we go to the grocery store other than Costco, and we know, no, I want that brand. And they've even done studies that people are actually grabbing their brand based on the color. And if you change the color, they can't find their brand. So a lot of choice sometimes is going to make us woo-woo. It's going to make us nuts. So, Costco says, no, I'll give you one kind of ketchup. That's what you get here, And
if you trust them because they have the Costco shoppers who are supplying it and they make sure they get the good one. Right. So then they're taking that burden off you.
Oh, and the techie world, you're wearing your black, the techie world said, no, I'm only going to wear black t-shirts. That's it. I don't want to make choices.
Right.
So I don't know, lots of choice. I think what I'm trying to say, it's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a lot different if you have no concern about paying your bills.
Right. But it's different if you choose to be different. You would have the option to do it. I could work, I could not work. I can do this, I can not do there'll be more options and you can decide what you want to do. And it can change. I can do something this time and I can change my mind and do something else, right? So it would be less force, less pressure to do it. But I think that the whole attention economy, YouTube and that kind of stuff would be, I want to do something interesting. I want to get the attention. And, going out, look at me going to the moons of Jupiter or something like that, being first would be a big thing. If you're the millionth guy doing it, it's like, it's a cool thing. But, it's the kind of thing of pushing the boundaries that there is actually an economic force, because like, if you're on that outbound thing, sending back your, Twitter video channel, with selling merch back to the people back home. Okay, I'm on the outbound mission to Alpha Centauri or something like that, right? If you're the first one, okay, you're the new solar system star or something like that, right? Exactly. And then other guys are going to other places. So it's something where there's actually economic force to it because of the social media, the whole kind of advertising economy.
So let me ask you, if there's a ticket to Mars and you can afford it, you going?
Yeah, I'm going.
You're going? All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Moon is sooner. You think you'll do Moon?
If that's an option, yes. All that. Like if I'm super jealous of Tim, the everyday astronaut, going on the orbit around the moon. It's like,
all right.
So it's fantastic.
So somebody's provide you a ticket, you're going. All right. That's good to know. All right. Well, I don't think we'll even bring this back around to Tesla again. I think we did what we set out to do here, which is to explore the future based on Brian Wang's analysis, that we are going to have so much abundance we won't. And I believe it. I believe it only or partially because what Brian pointed out, what we've done in 100 years. Oh my gosh, it's incredible what we might do just in a few more. Especially, as Kathy Wood says, because we're kind of at this apex where technologies are coming together, where this technology is amplifying that technology, which is amplifying a third technology. And those things working together could provide us with it. Well, okay, so Tony Seba says, maybe you agree with him, maybe you don't. He says that the cost of overhead per person in 2035 will be $250 a month. There'll be transportation, housing, food, energy in your house, and entertainment will be $250 a month.
Yeah, but I could also get a $50 TV that matches a TV from 20 years ago or something like that, right? You could do it, but you won't, right? So yes, we can easier to get that minimum level of capability, to someone who has $200, $1,000 a year in developing countries. So raising the bottom end of the tail,
right?
But the whole thing of living with less is something that
I'm not interested in
advertising and marketing has solved those issues where people don't want to sell for less. So
I'm not worried about people. I'm not worried about long-term people wanting less. Not at all.
Right.
I'm really, and I've traveled the world and I've been to almost all the places I care to go to. There's a few left that I'd like to go to, but I think the biggest problem in the future, until we get these rockets going to these other planets, the biggest problem in the future is going to be enough places for people to go and be entertained or to have their adventure, because already Venice is saying that they're going to limit the number of people that can go to Venice. New Orleans is now charging $1 to go on what I forget the name of the street, the main street in New Orleans. You have to pay I don't know if they've passed that, but they were talking about charging people $1 just to go on there because it's like this almost anytime you go now. So that I think is going to be the biggest conundrum in the future, is not enough places to go to be entertained, which if I was young right now, if I was 25 years old, I would be developing entertainment facilities for the future. That's what I'd be doing. It's unlimited in terms of the potential.
Yeah, I definitely think that they'll just make more. You make copies of, Eiffel Tower, you make, you have the Vegas thing. Producing more places to go is
right. Well, Brian, this has been fun, really enjoyable. I'm looking forward to putting the book together with you. And again, folks, I hope that you would like what you've seen today. I hope that you would subscribe to the channel and get more like this, because I've got more interviews coming up. As I did a video the other day where I explained the list of interviewees that are coming up, and I had Brian on first because I thought he'd be the most fascinating. But right, Brian? Anyway, and so subscribe to Brian's channel as well. The
Next Big Future. Yeah.
And also check out his blog and get on there. And I'm sure you'll find tons and tons of opportunities to learn about the stuff that Brian has been writing about for years and years. Oh man, I'm wrapping it up, Brian, and I've left off one of the things I knew I wanted to ask you. And it'll take 5 minutes. Sure. I know it'll take 5 minutes. So folks, I'm sorry. Or maybe we'll edit this to where we put it at the end. I don't know. Whatever we want to do with it. Brian, what is your process for going to predicting the future? How do you start with the idea, okay, I want to predict this future event? How do you then, I'm sure there's a lot of research involved, but then how do you narrow it down to where you can make a prediction that you feel comfortable with?
Okay, so one, I'm involved with a site called Metaculus.com, which is a futurist prediction site where you make public predictions.
How do you spell that?
METACULUS, Metaculus.
Okay.
Yeah. .com. And and I participated before that in the Good Judgment project headed up by Professor Tetlock. It was for the IARPA. So there's the DARPA is more famous, Defense Advanced Research Projects, and then IARPA is Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency. So that is basically the spy agency's research arm. So they were trying to, figure out how to make good predictions on that. So I participated in those things. I just missed becoming a super forecaster for the Good Judgment project. There was a couple of particular questions where I loaded up on it, and I disagree with how they settled that particular question. But anyway, so I made public predictions before. So basically, I look at, I've gotten over the 30,000 articles I've written, and all this studying a broad view of the world, right? So I create a model of it. I go back, looking all over the world, and then I'll look back in history and try and see how things develop, trying to ask the 5 whys of why things happen, right? So I have this foundational base, and I've been doing it for a long time. And then when I made predictions in the past, I would then track, okay, I thought there would be over 100 people up in space, in the space station by, 2010. It didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? What was the reason? And then trace it back to, government incompetence, NASA issues and stuff like that, right? And then, and also look at the economics of it. So I had to look at the economics of why things happened as well. So by doing constant root cause analysis and trying to figure out how, going back, could I predict this, or something happened, why did that big change happen? And then going to the real causes of it, not necessarily taking the dogma around, okay, Industrial Revolution, well, what was going on in the Industrial Revolution, right? What was actually happening there? How poor were we? What were the technologies? How were the shift on that? And so going down to those levels, also looking at the flow of energy and those kind of things. So in terms of that, I have to have a framework of the world and from history going forward. And I also have a system for ranking advancement. Like people talk about, okay, we have a $100 trillion economy, and then we have 8 billion people, and then you roll back and you have other adjustments and stuff like that. But there's another system when they have Kardashev, where they basically say, Kardashev level 1 is we have all the energy that's hitting the Earth and solar energy, right? And then we have Kardashev level 2, which is all the energy of the solar system. Kardashev level 3, all the energy in the galaxy, right? That system, even if you go like 0.1, is not useful because we're at 0.72 or something like that on that system. But if you go at a doubling method, where I say, okay, I go from, 1 Adam and Eve up to today, Adam and Eve being 1, right? And then coming up to 8 billion today, I can say that is 33 doublings from 2 people up to 8 billion, right? So then I can then use that doubling system to map out the entire world, all materials, all energy, all information, right? And I can say, okay, World War II, we're at 2 billion people, we're at 31, right? So I can and look at that happening every 25 years. So I have a easy conceptual model for frameworking that whole thing out. The fact that I made hundreds of predictions, 90% right or better, on the Metaxas system, that what I've learned from doing a lot of predictions is that, it's key to getting the conditions and terms right for the result that you're talking about. Because you're qualifying, you have to have it falsifiable, and you have to have it quantified. If you say, we're going to get richer in the future, well, how rich? When? Right? So you have to have the quantification around it, you have to have it falsifiable too, right? Otherwise, you make some, and it has to be meaningful prediction. I can say, Britney Spears would be 1 year older next year. Well, who cares, right? So you have to have that kind of, what matters and figuring out what matters, how the world works, where are things, the inflection points for where things can happen.
Right.
So you're focusing on the important things, and you're focusing on trying to be accurate and trying to calibrate what it is you're talking about, right? And then to identify what really matters. So I can dig deep on the semi truck and the batteries and how that matters and the economics of it, right? Can identify that at an inflection point, right? Tesla, SpaceX, Elon, Twitter, inflection points, right? Same thing for Google or for AI development or for DeepMind, right? Or for anti-aging, aging reversal, right? Life extension. The medical things can also be huge matters. And also on the negative side, COVID, pandemic, wars, et cetera, right? So you have the negative events as well, right? So that is the whole framework. And also I'm looking at falsifiable points, right? Because they say I go from here to there, right? And I say this will happen. I had to pass through a bunch of points in between, right? So if I say I pass through some point, and it's like, well, that point doesn't make sense because everyone have to do this, right? So I have to, trace along the way to say, does that make sense? Like, blah, 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 everyone's gonna, like 4 billion people on this side, 4 billion people on this side, they have knives, they could kill each other. Well, what has to happen for that to start going on, right? And say, well, this is clearly not gonna happen, right? So you have to go through and see, everyone's going to starve. Well, before that happens, you'll go through World War II rationing, where England had 10 times less food and still no one died, right? So you have to look at what the situation is, and then transition points down to say, what happens. Same thing for stock and other things. So you have to have and be able to do it simplify the models where I can cut out what doesn't matter, what's noise, what's irrelevant to the whole thing. And then does this thing happening start changing things around the rest of the system? Right.
Which could then result in not.
Right. This domino goes down. What happens because of that? Right. So that's the kind of analysis that I'll do on it to say, to train myself up to know what it is, and also knowing when I don't know. Right. Because if I make, 385 predictions that resolved on Metaculus, and I only got, 25, 35 really wrong, right? So less than 10% of it, right? I could have made more predictions and got more of them wrong because I was choosing an area I don't know anything about. I'm just tossing it out there, just like trying to guess, right? And so it's just like a baseball pitcher, a batter. I'm Barry Bonds. I'm saying I'm not going to hit that. I'm going to next swing at that. I'm, great is 400 batting average, right? I can have a better average. There's no limit on how many balls I have to pass up, right? I can say I'm going to predict this and what's in my zone, and then I'll make the prediction, right? I can try and make a prediction about something else just because whatever I want to, but I can choose what to predict and what not to predict. Right. So one, I may take something, but that's important. I want to try and figure that out. So I'll take a difficult pitch because I want to figure out what that thing is because it matters. Right. But if I can also say, well, I can cut it back. I think I've narrowed it down to this, but I can expand the range because I want to be more accurate. Say, okay, here's the bounds of what it is that's possible on this particular thing. Right. And what causes it to end up in the lower end, higher end, or whatever of the bound. Right. So that's how I'm thinking about things. Also things like, people predict doom and gloom, well, at various points, things happen, as the economy gets worse, right? Where you will stimulate and do stuff. It's like, people who predict doom and gloom, it's kind of like, and there's utter incompetence and everyone, trying to do nothing. It's like, oh, we have genocide, but you're saying, and those people won't try and save themselves.
Right.
So there's the kind of things where, things can be great, things can be bad. And it's like, what's in the upper bound of the great? Like these things have to keep going right. Well, I have to allow for execution to not work, right? And then what data am I gathering about execution so they can update, right? So those are the kind of things that I look at in terms of like how to calibrate a prediction.
Fascinating. So I consider myself to be a futurist, and I make all kinds of predictions. I don't write them down. I don't take any, but I did finally this year. You may have seen on Twitter. And I actually did a video about it. I made a bunch of predictions about Tesla in 2023. So this will be the first time that I'll be tracking, and we'll find out next year. I don't think I'll get 90% right though, because I didn't spend nearly the kind of effort to get to those numbers that you do.
Right.
But thank you, Brian, again.
Thank you.
And we will undoubtedly be doing more videos together in the future and bringing you back to my channel. And I think you and I are going to do something for your channel as well. So it's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.